Joining me is Nik Dvornak, Portfolio Manager at Platinum Asset Management. Nik, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Europe is, if you listen to the media, Europe's a basket case politically, economically. It's about to unwind. You're much more optimistic than that about Europe. So can you tell us why?
So, of course, the focus is on the politics, as you rightly mentioned, but the reality is the economy is recovering. Europe has struggled for a number of years, but for the last 2 to 3 years, you've seen a very broad-based recovery in Europe, both across sectors and countries. So that's the first point. And unemployment throughout Europe is falling, and it's falling fastest in countries where it's highest, which tends to reduce the appeal of populism and reduce political instability. The second point to bear in mind, and while you can carry on about Greece ad nauseum, Greece has been through hell. I mean, they've got unemployment, and the economy has shrunk to a degree that you could probably equate with the US in the Great Depression. They have had every possible reason you can think of to leave, and they haven't. They've chosen to stay. Since the GFC, 3 new countries have actually joined the euro. None have left. And what you're seeing is, as the economy is recovering, you're seeing support for the euro increase throughout all the eurozone, bar Italy, where it's at a low level. Everywhere else, it's increasing, and you're seeing it increase strongest in places like Spain. So that's the second point. It's actually increasing. Where you have countries that are against the euro, it tends to be EU member states that have not yet adopted the euro as their currency. Right. So you might see reluctance of new members to join, but those that are in the euro, support's actually increasing, and they like it. It's actually at high levels by historical standards.
What did you make of the French election that's just passed?
Look, 2 things. So I think you'd be crazy to ignore the warning that election brought. I mean, 1/3 of the population voted for Marine Le Pen, and I think, you cannot afford not to take notice of that. And I'm hoping that people in Brussels are paying attention and take it very seriously. In the short term, though, it looks like we've dodged a bullet. I mean, Macron promises some very sensible reforms. I think he's a voice for moderation, and he's a voice in support of the EU. So that promises good things in terms of at least near-term political stability.
Yeah. And so also on going back to the political aspect of it, we've also got a German election this year. How are you seeing that playing out or the significance of it in later this year?
So Germany is interesting because if you look at places like France and the UK, it's typically, the common thread for the populists is about the distribution of income. People feel alienated, they feel left out by the globalization process, and they feel ignored by officials in Brussels who they didn't elect. Germany is different because the economy is actually strong. I mean, youth unemployment is 7% compared to 25% average in Europe. Participation rates in the workforce are extremely high. So you actually have a strong economy.
And they've been benefiting from the low euro.
They have been benefiting from the low euro. And, the issue there really is about immigration and border security, which, I mean, is a slightly different one to anti-globalization. So, and that's where sort of Merkel has, perhaps done her political career a disservice, but obviously, she's stood by her beliefs. Yes. What you are seeing, though, is increased support from Merkel slowly in local provincial elections. Yeah. And so, I tend to think, regardless of what happens, I tend to think, it's still going to be positive for the EU. I think there's still going to be that centrist element, which is very happy to remain in the EU. But where you might see some changes is around immigration and how willingly they welcome refugees.
And finally, on Europe, how have you, because you are in charge of a significant portion of you run the European Fund, I think, Platinum. Right. So how have you positioned the fund to make money for investors over the last big period of time?
Yeah, look, so the positioning has really been driven by Brexit. So, unfortunately, we didn't think the British would vote to leave the European Union. No. So we weren't terribly well positioned ahead of Brexit in terms of stocks, but we were aware that there was
an orphan, by the way. You weren't an orphan. Yeah.
Thank you very much. But look, we did hold a lot of cash at the time, and so when the markets collapsed, we were able to take advantage of the opportunities. So before the event, we got it wrong. Afterwards, though, we got it very right. And so portfolio positioning still reflects that quite a lot. Where you've seen the big recovery in recent months has been in France, and we do own many French companies, and our positioning has been much more on the exporters. So, we own companies that, so one company makes Gucci handbags, and, the idea is women will want Gucci handbags regardless of who runs France. Another company makes insulin, and diabetics will need insulin regardless of who's in power in France. So, we've positioned in companies that were cheap, but wouldn't really have been affected one way or the other by who won the French election.
So big picture, you're optimistic on France. The economy is actually growing there, including in Greece, from what we read.
It certainly has stabilised, and the prospects look good. And you're seeing very good growth in Eastern Europe, in Scandinavia. The one sort of place which still leaves quite a lot to be desired is Italy. And what makes them stand out is the Italians never really had that gun to the head moment that the Spanish or the Greeks or the Portuguese or the Irish had. And so those tough reforms that these other troubled peripheral countries implemented were never implemented in Italy. In a way, they've missed that opportunity because the crisis wasn't as bad as it was in these other countries. And I suspect if you do see political tensions in Europe, Italy will probably be the flashpoint in the future.
Nik, thanks for your thoughts on Europe, and congratulations on a great 12 months in the European Fund.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.